Tom, I know it's your first feature film. What was it about this story? What was it that? Why did you think this was the one?
I didn't think it was the one. I just wanted to make a film, and I think my friend Will should be here somewhere. Can you whoop? There he is. And I was editing the short film that I made with Dan, and going through all kinds of things in my life. And I used to meet Will for lunch every day in Soho Square, and we'd have coffee and chat. And then I'd go back to editing, and he'd go back to this call center he was working at the time. And over time, I just thought it was quite an interesting reality of life that we were living that I somehow didn't see anywhere. It wasn't quite reflected back to me. So I thought it might be fun to try and make a film about something that I knew or saw around me, I guess.
And how did you go about finding your cast? I mean, Edward and Elisa, how did you first get involved with the project?
I met Tom. I think the summer of 2010, and we went for coffee on the South Bank, and we talked about a character which at the time was called Ben, who was this comedian, and then we met I think twice more, and eventually Tom said that I should come and play the part, and then Elisa.
I guess it went through a conventional route, right? I met a casting director who talked to me. Oh no, or she, whatever. We ended up meeting in a cafe as well, and we talked about life, and we talked about London, and the experience of being a foreigner and coming to move to London. I think Tom and I have lived in London for about the same amount of time, which is about 10 years. And yeah, we chatted for about 2-3 hours, and then I was hired for the job, and that's it.
I mean, there's such a sense of kind of naturalism, there's such a sense of realism in the film. I mean, how did the three of you kind of work together? I mean, did you kind of workshop the film? Was there an improvisational aspect to it?
Do you want me to answer that? Well, it was all improvised, so yes. It was kind of strange. We would just meet every day in this sort of abandoned building in Old Street that Dan found for us, and sort of talk about stuff, about things that were going on with us, about ideas that were interesting. And then we started basing improvisations on that and tried to create a sort of a world of relationships and of situations, of a sort of reality of life that wasn't character-driven in the sense of a classical character, but in the sense of a life that was real for that time, that we sort of invented between us. And we tried to whirl that energy as much as we could and hoped that something would come sort of bursting out when we ended up making the film, and then we'd catch it.
I've always kind of felt that one of the only films I've ever seen that, for me, captured London and felt like the kind of real London that I live in was Michael Winterbottom's Wonderland. And actually, watching your film for the first time was I had a similar kind of feeling. It was like, wow, this is where I live. This is a kind of London, not a film version of it. Was that kind of sense of realism important for you and something that you wanted to capture from the outset?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, Wonderland is one of my favorite films, so that's an incredible reference. I think really, I mean, as I said, I think I just wanted to make something that I could recognize. You know, I know a lot of black people, and they're not all in gangs. I know a lot of gay people, and they're not all camp, or they're not even all sure of what they are. I know a lot of foreigners, as and I am one, but we're not necessarily asylum seekers. We all come to London, we've all come to London to search for something, and maybe some of us will find it, maybe some of us won't, but I wanted to sort of show these individuals, or something of these individuals that were beyond stereotype, I think. I think that was quite important to me.
I think for me anyway, well, I don't know, but I think the London itself dictates a lot of what the emotions of the characters are. I think And hopefully for any of you who live here, you may have been able perhaps to recognize some of those feelings, but they're definitely universal feelings of, searching for creative satisfaction or love or loneliness or friendships, consolidating those things, but they're very much to do with what London is and what it makes you feel, I think, yeah.
I think it's a very subtle film in a lot of ways. I think that characters, they may act in a certain way, but you don't feel the need to then explain exactly why they've done what they've done, or go into kind of monologues where they justify their every kind of move. I think in that way you put quite a lot onto the viewer and kind of ask their own interpretation of things. Is that quite a frightening thing to do as a filmmaker, to make something that's not kind of 100% clear?
No. Of course it is. It's horrible. Because it means that people might like it or they might not. I think we were interested when we were making it and when we were cutting it about the spaces between things and the spaces that an audience would need to invest something in the film, and to invite an audience to be part of this film but not to attack them. Again, it's a taste thing. I feel that I go to the cinema a lot and I'm sort of bamboozled into admiring the mechanics of a film or the different elements of it, but often I don't feel invited to a dialogue with it. And I thought it might be fun to try and make a film that sort of reaches out to an audience, I hope, and offers to have a conversation, but not necessarily attack. I don't know. I have very conflicting feelings about London. Many of them are in the film. When I came here, I thought it was the most amazing place in the world. I was sort of drugged up for about 3 or 4 years. And then it became a real place, and then I hated it for a while. And now I'm like, oh, I don't know, it's kind of where I live, and that's it, really. And some of it's good and some of it's bad, and sometimes I feel shit and sometimes I don't, but I don't know if I blame the city quite as much as I used to.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not a foreigner in the sense that I come from England, but I'm from Sheffield, and I came down to London about 12 years ago, and I find London, if I'm working and if I've got something to do, London's great, but if I've got nothing to do, London suddenly becomes a much bigger space, and I do feel quite lonely in London sometimes, but you just tend to know the bits you're working in. Like, that's what I like about this film, is I feel like you see big parts of London. Like, you see kind of how vast it is, like, and how spread out it is. Whereas I feel like you just, when you live here, you just kind of see little bits of it all the time.
I think for me, part of it was the experience of realizing that you're not going to be the person that you thought you were going to be. I think I came to London with certain aspirations and dreams, and 10 years on, I'm not that person. And I think that's interesting. So, he wants to be a comedian now. I think before it, he probably wanted to be other things. And part of the journey of it is that moment of going, I'm actually not who I thought I was going to be when I was 21. As none of us are. I'm certainly not. I wish I'm not.
I don't think you're doing too badly, though.
I know, but I wanted to be Terrence Malick.
No, I mean, we rehearsed, like Tom said, in a room in Shoreditch for about 14 weeks, I think. Some of the other actors in the film I know very well already before we'd started. Some of them I'd never met before. But we spent a good deal of time together, both in character and out. A lot of the character of Ed comes from my life, and a lot of it doesn't. So it was quite easy. It's quite a difficult thing to explain. It started off being me and Tom in a room, and we would do, I might do 2 or 3 hours or even less in a character of what we were trying. And by the end, I mean, it was almost 24/7. I felt like this was a version of me that I became. It was a strange. I've never had that experience before on a film. I've not had it since on a TV or film. But I mean, this wasn't an easy person to live inside for those 4 weeks of filming. But it's amazing to watch it. Some of it feels so incredibly personal when I watch it. I feel so sad for me. It's an emotional thing for me to sit and watch it. I mean, the scene where the compere rips into me. I mean, the comedy, although it's not very good. It was mine, and me and Tom had been on a course, and I'd written it, and I stood up in front of those people who didn't know we were making a film, and they stared at me like I was an idiot, and then the compere went on and ripped a new one out of me, and to watch it's painful. It's not an easy thing to sit and watch. It still hurts that he said those things about my character's jokes. It's a bizarre thing. So, yeah.
No, the story didn't. No, some of it did, some of it didn't. We had these rules that we had to obey, and we obeyed them. We didn't really break the rules apart from once. And it meant that at certain points the story became something very different to what maybe I had in mind. But part of the game was that we were working in like series of knots. So we were trying to make one knot lead into the next knot. And it meant that we went in different directions. Some of them didn't make it into the film because they sort of petered out, or, I didn't like them, basically. So it's strange. In some ways, it's very similar to the film I thought we were going to make, and in some ways, it's very, very different to the film that I thought we were going to make. But I can't quite differentiate. It's quite a strange experience to describe why and how. It just sort of, I don't know, I was sort of hit by a bus at one point, and then I woke up and there were 80 hours of rushes. So that's kind of why, and then we spent 10 months cutting it.
Yes, they were. They were in the sense that, like Ed was saying a minute ago, we were working with ourselves and our own experiences and our own feelings. A lot of the time, so it was it was about trusting the director at first to open up and give him all these things. And obviously, there were some themes that we were following, and those things I mentioned earlier: loneliness in London, and love, and friendships, and creation, and all of that. And it was, we just sort of spent hours talking and sort of telling Tom what we felt about those things, and it was hard because you were kind of surfing a fine line between what characters we were trying to make for the film, but actually they came from us, and to watch it back, you kind of go, oh God, that's me, but maybe people won't read it that way, or so it was emotionally challenging because we just had to give, and then see what happens. And because we weren't following a strict storyline, we also weren't sure where that was going to go. So it just felt like having to dive into something and then just not look back.